This one, the title is The Mystery of the Known, the Joy, Angst, and Poetry of Man. And it's going to be led by the Marion B. Cohen. So I would like to just say a few things about her before you begin your reading. So Marion has a PhD from Wesleyan University, and her early research was in mathematics, actually, in topics such as general relativity, gravity, and so forth. She has published widely in many well-known mathematical journals, and she has lived also with another just strong passion in her life, which is literature and poetry. She has published more than 15 books on different topics that just revolve around poetry and literature. Her writing, which I guess I would dare to describe, if you forgive me, as mostly about your own personal experiences, is, to quote from one review of her work, profoundly felt and rigorously observed. She has written poignantly on very difficult and personal topics, such as caregiving for a chronically ill person, and that on some of her works like Excellent Country and the forthcoming Chronic Progressive, which I think you have copies of.
Actually, just the proof copy is
Oh,
out,
great.
but I do have the flyers for it.
Wonderful. And also, for example, about pregnancy loss in An Ambitious Sort of Grief. Marion has also looked into the intersection between poetry and mathematics. And out of this had come many well-received poems on mathematics, some of which are collected into her book, Crossing the Equal Sign. She has also developed, and that's much more recently, for Arcadia, a wonderfully received new course that I'm sure some of you had taken, some of you who are here, which is called Truth and Beauty, Mathematics and Literature. So it's with great pleasure that I welcome you here tonight. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for being here. Now you can hear me better, but I have to, is that too loud? Oh, really? Okay. All right. Well, I guess it comes as no big surprise, to people here at least, that math can inspire emotion, and has throughout history, even for non-mathematicians. Maybe not all non-mathematicians, but some. So you can shout disagreement if you want to. Now is your chance, your only chance. When I use the short phrase math poetry, it's often called mathematical poetry. And what it is poetry that's inspired by mathematics in some way. And there has been fiction and creative nonfiction that's inspired by mathematics in various ways. It's a little bit like science fiction, inspired by science. Why not, right? So there are three categories, at least three, of this math poetry, mathematical poetry. One is poetry that looks like math, I could say. You can even say it's concrete poetry, which is some, or at any rate, in form, it is mathematical, again, in various ways. I think that actually basically all poetry is mathematically in form. Even if it's free verse, it still has some kind of logic and math and rhythm to it. Some people by math poetry, that's what they mean. An example might be that the nth line of the poem has as its number of syllables the nth digit of pi. There are poems like that, and then there's a school of poetry called Oulipo. It's French, so I think I'm pronouncing it right. O-U-L-I-P-O. I've heard it pronounced actually. So I pronounce the way everyone else pronounces whether it's right or not. And they have some interesting ideas as to poetry, how to use math concepts, some advanced, some not, to create, and sometimes very randomly, a poem. And the quality of the poem can often depend on a lot of things, in particular chance, probability. That is not the kind of poetry that I write. And another type of math poetry is just regular poetry that uses images from math. So regular poetry often has images, not always. And sometimes the images can come from mathematics, so is often not understandable by the reader, but that's true anyway. That can often be true anyway with poetry. And I write a lot of those. And I'm going to read, though, two that are not written by me, that I like a lot. One is it's a very short poem written by a very, I assume short, he was 8 years old, so I assume he was a short person. And actually I think it was a she, I'm not sure, because it's from an anthology of poetry written by Japanese children. So the name of the anthology is There Are Two Lives, poems by children of Japan, edited by Richard Lewis. This poem is translated, they're all translated by someone named Haruna Kimura. And this little 8-year-old boy wrote this math poem called Older Brother. My older brother got angry. His eyes became a triangle. My older brother's eyes are a triangle, I said. Then his eyes became a hexagon. And actually, when I was reading it the other day, I was wondering how eyes become a triangle, right? And eyes become a hexagon, and did the kid mean his eyes became triangles? And actually, I have to ask my husband over there. In Japanese, they don't have plural and singular, right? So
not a good translation.
Oh, okay. I was wondering if it was not a good translation, or if the translator somehow chose to do it that way, because I would have translated differently. Okay. And the other is written by a colleague in math poetry of mine. Her name is Joanne Browning, and she actually was one of the editors of one of the books, for the poetry part of the Truth and Duty course that I taught in the spring, that Carlos was talking about. And this is one of my favorite poems by her. It's not in the book, but it's in her book, one of her books is called My Dance is Mathematics. This poem is called Misunderstanding. Ah, you are a mathematician, they say with admiration or scorn. Then they say, I could use you to balance my checkbook. I think about checkbooks once in a while. I balance mine, just like sometimes I dust high shelves. The only thing, and this is not my poem, but I don't balance my checkbook either. And as far as I know, everything's fine with my checks. And I know at least one other mathematician doesn't balance her checkbook either. So, I'll let that speak for itself. And the third category is a lot of what I write, a lot of poems about math itself, with or without. Yeah, I'm hearing noises. Oh, yes. All right, is this better? Oh, thanks for letting me know. I hope people have heard what I've said up till now.
Hold on for a second. I may just move the thing.
Okay. Yeah, I tend to do that. Okay. How's that? People can hear me now? Yes. Okay. Poems about math with images from math or without images from math. The poem whose subject matter is math, learning math, doing math, teaching math, living in a world with math, adoring math, passionate about math, angst about math, and so on. As I say, I write lots of those. And someone I once read, who's I would give credit to if I remembered, if I knew, said, I prefer looking for poetry in math to looking for math in poetry. And I actually feel the same way, but we don't have to feel that way. Anyway, so first, though, we're going to hear from two other poets who write about mathematics, and these are non-mathematicians. And one is a rather famous poet named Rita Dove, who I actually heard her read about a couple weeks ago. And she wrote 2 math poems, both of which are in that anthology that I mentioned. I asked her if she wrote more math poetry. She said no, those are the only 2 she's written. But she was also, as a child, good in math and liked math and so on. And she wrote, I don't think she wrote this when she was a child, but the poem is called Geometry. I prove a theorem and the house expands. The windows jerk free to hover near the ceiling. The ceiling floats away with a sigh. As the walls clear themselves of everything but transparency, the scent of carnations leaves with them. I am out in the open, and above the windows have hinged into butterflies, sunlight glinting where they've intersected. They're going to some point true and unproven. And now we're going to hear from a poet who did not love math. A poet named, I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name correctly, Agi Mishol. It was translated from the Hebrew by Lisa Katz, and it goes like this. And students in that class will recognize both these poems. Again, called Geese. My math teacher, Epstein, liked to call me to the blackboard. He said that my head was good only for hats, and that a bird with brains like mine would fly backwards. He sent me to tend the geese. Now, at a distance of years from his sentence, when I sit under the palm tree with my 3 beautiful geese, I think that math teacher of mine was farsighted. He was right. Because nothing makes me happier than to watch them now, falling upon breadcrumbs, joyful tails wagging or freezing for a moment under beads of water when I spray them with a hose, holding their heads erect, bodies stretched back as if remembering faraway lakes. Since then, my math teacher has died, together with the math problems I could never solve. I like hats, and always at evening, when the birds return to the tree, I look for the one flying backwards. I'd like to read you one of the first math poems that I ever wrote. At the time, I didn't know I was writing math poems. I thought I was writing in my diary. I was a teenager. This one's from age 15. I thought I was writing in my diary about how I felt about math. And then later, it got published in my very first book. It was a small chapbook called The Weirdest is the Sphere. Anyway, this poem is, so I just call it Diary Excerpt, age 15, otherwise known as Marion's polynomial poem among the Philadelphia poetry scene from way back. And I have to confess that at age 15, I didn't write that last sentence. I have to confess, the poetic license added that last sentence in my early 30s. I might have thought it, I don't remember. Anyway, diary excerpt, age 15. You know, falling in love is something like solving a polynomial equation. Everybody has his or her own polynomial, and the roots of that polynomial correspond to the loves that person has. Everyone has only a finite number of loves. Some people have polynomials with negative roots. That's when the loves live in different countries or died in childhood or something like that. Some people have polynomials with imaginary roots. That's when the loves are born on other planets or existed billions of years ago or from now, or are amoebas or insects. And there are some people like me who have just plain linear polynomials. These people have just one love. Or perhaps I'm one of those people who have constant polynomials. Our equations have no solutions. We have no roots. We belong nowhere. We have no one. That's the adolescent me. And I'd like to read, I'm probably going to read more poems from Crossing than anything else. But I'd like to say a little bit about the evolution of my own math poetry, meaning the evolution of my passion for math. I was, good in math, especially in high school, but I knew, especially after taking algebra, but I knew that for me, even then, I knew that it was more than just being good in math. I knew that I had feelings for angst, as we say, joy, angst, and poetry, even though I wasn't using the word poetry at the time. I knew it was, it was more than just being good in it. And so, like as you saw, I would write in my diary about girlish things and also about math. And actually, my first 2 poems, they weren't finished, but I called them poems. First things I did called serious poems. And they were about my passion for math, and I didn't really quite understand them. They just came out of me, and I knew that in order to write them down, they had to be in the dark. I was so sensitive, in general, and sensitive about math. And so I woke up, especially in the middle of the night, to write these poems down. So that's just one instance just to say how quietly passionate then I was about math. And then in my 30s, I started writing poetry, and then soon math poetry. And get, like I say, my first book, small chapbook, tiny, The Weirdest is the Sphere. And the second wave, which I don't know if there was ever a time lapse between the first and the second wave, but the second wave came in the 90s, when I was working on a problem in math that I was particularly, an original problem, or I thought it was original, okay? That I was particularly passionate about, and was determined to see through to the end. I didn't care whether other people had worked on it. I just wanted to, do it myself and experience it myself and to own it in that way. Anyway, while I was working on that problem, I also wrote poems, math poems, a different type from what I'd written before, and those are the ones that are in crossing, or some of the poems in crossing, or most of them are from that period. Some of them are about that, just about that period. And the problem had to do with graph theory, but I didn't know that then. I thought it was points and lines, and I soon learned, sort of the hard way, that it was graph theory that I was doing. Well, it turned out to be a very difficult problem in graph theory, though. So, I'm kind of proud of that, actually. And in graph theory terms, it's characterized a post-set graph, or partially ordered set graph. It comes from that. So people don't have to understand that, and I didn't understand that then, but I do now. So much later, I connected up with I learned that there were other people, who were math poets, or just poetic mathematicians. Jed von Cannon at Drexel, and I did readings together. And then, as I mentioned, Joanne Grounding and her co-editor, Sarah Glaze, and some new contacts that I've made recently. And along with that went developing the Math and Beauty course, which I had actually thought about actually at least a decade before that, and other places had expressed an interest in it. It didn't really happen until here at Arcadia, and so I'm particularly excited, about that course, and it was just a wonderful spring that I had. And another thing about the history of my passion for math is that poem about graph theory. I'm now actually learning graph theory. I mean, I've picked up a lot of it through the years, just being a mathematician, but now I'm reviewing a book on graph theory and really, learning it. It's a problems-oriented approach, so I'm getting to do the problems, getting to be a student again. Anyway, so I'm going to, so I don't know how much all that has in common with other math poets. Well, I do know. Some of it, yes, some of it not. Anyway, so I'm going to read poems from Crossing the Equal Sign that are about, the process of working on math, and what it feels like for me, at any rate. I know people other math researchers have said they also felt this way, what it feels like to do math research. So there may be math parts that you don't understand. Is there a question? Am I having?
Just a little bit lower.
Oh, speaking too loud. Okay. How's this? Good.
Keep going.
Perfectly perfect.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah,
In every way, almost whatever. Practically perfect in every way. So this is how this is how it began for me. That particular problem. I was just going to say that even, don't worry if you don't understand all the math in it, because, well, that's the math that's part of the idea, you know. And I know, at least for me, when I read a poem, I don't understand, even if it's a poem that I love, I don't necessarily understand every single line. So that's it. And these poems are untitled. They're all, most of them are untitled in this book. So I'll just pause briefly, turn the page, and you'll know we're changing poems. Points were blinking, lines were beckoning. How was I to know? What could I have done? I heard some voices. I had some time. There was a tenderness. There was a weeping. How was I to know the points would not point? How was I to know the lines would not line up? Before I read this poem, I must live up to my promise and tell you what a lemma is. Those of you who have read my flyer, I promised to tell you what a lemma is, and some of you don't know. You'll find out anyway. I'll tell you anyway what you don't know. Well, a theorem is a mathematical fact, and so is a corollary. It comes from the theorem, and so is a lemma. But a lemma comes before the theorem, or sometimes more than one lemma are needed to prove the theorem, the main, the main fact. There's more about lemmas that I could say, such as that some of them which start out being lemmas wind up being main theorems, in the history, of math. But they precede theorems, and when you're trying to prove the theorem, you don't, you want the theorem. You don't want you want the lemmas, but you want the theorem to hurry up and get to the theorem, So you need, that helps in understanding, especially the end of this poem. Someone wrote a book called The Joy of Math. Maybe I'll write a book called The Pathos of Math. For through the night I swivel between intuition and calculation, between examples and counterexamples, between the problem itself and what it has led to. I find special cases with no determining vertices. I find special cases with only determining vertices. I weave in and out. I rock to and fro. I am the wanderer with a lemma in every port. So is it still practically perfect in every way as far as my voice level? All right. All right, here's the title poem, which means it contains the title of the book, Crossing the Equal Sign. After a while, making a proof is like making a calculation. There are certain things you automatically do. You move with closed eyes, clenched eyes, unseeing eyes, no eyes. You move sometimes with no brain. After a while, crossing the implication sign is like crossing the equal sign. After a while, a proof is collapsed to a point. I am no workaholic, but I'm collecting points and lines. Not like stamps, no, I wouldn't trade them. I simply have to have them. I need a group portrait, all of them smiling. I have to have a hand with these beauties as fingers. I have to hold a vase with these cuties as flowers. I should contact a colleague. I should go online. But don't you see? I have to do this alone. I am based in reality, but God created these lammies, set them out to green pasture, and maketh me to lie down. I have to do this alone. Mathematicians don't always work alone. But for that problem, I did. I wanted to and did. And another thing about doing math research. When what worked for years suddenly plays, when what played for years suddenly dies, when insides are not all that need to be rescued, when the ports in which we deposited our lemmas suddenly become portals, when a theorem has neither application nor implication, when the easiest lemma to prove, the one you were not even proving, the one you were saving for last, when that lemma isn't true. A mathematician doesn't give up. A mathematician insists on insisting something is going on. And several times I thought I had proved the theorem and hadn't yet. So here's one poem about that loss. that little loss. It's better to have loved and lost than not to have loved at all. And I wouldn't have had the envelope lemma. I wouldn't have had the two-triangle lemma. I wouldn't have walked those misty streets. I wouldn't have met those crusty old souls. And then finally, Eureka! Pretty Eureka! Pretty Eureka with sugar on top. I have read the signs, I have broken the code. I collected my lemmas from every port and brought them on board. I brought them to my country. I see the scene, I see the act. I have not solved the cosmos, but I have solved this house. Most of infinity is still unsolved, but I have this picture. I have this brain. And these are one poem, really, about math itself, not about working on math, but about math itself, one of my many poems about that. And this is the title poem for this reading, meaning it contains the phrase, the mystery of the known. Okay, I have to qualify a little bit. I promised you the Cantor Middle Third set in one of the write-ups of this, and actually that set technically is a fractal that has a fractional dimension, and so I really say something that's a little bit erroneous in this poem, but it is on the line, it's not on the plane, you know, the one-dimensional, and poetic license, and so on. Here's the poem. What drove me into math was not Fermat's last. I preferred the factoring at the difference of two squares, and Cantor stretched out one-dimensional lace. Also, the center of a circle is inside the circle. What drove me into math was not the mystery of the unknown, but the mystery of the known. Other early influences. The point of light just happening to coincide with the only visible corner of our living room. Those dark red shapes when you close your eyes tight, and that spot, that nightmare of many bloody colors. Now here's a quick poem, actually it's not that, it's a two-page poem, 1.5-page poem, about teaching. We're going to have a few poems about teaching. And this is at the time, we're talking over 15 years ago, it was how I felt when I taught. Actually, I don't feel that way now when I teach. I feel pretty normal, like I'm having a conversation, you know. I stand up there and dance, the dance of the unsteady. I sway, I swirl, I spin a semicircle, afraid of making a mistake and spinning a full circle. Yes, afraid of integrating from 0 to 2 pi instead of just pi. Oh, teaching is a dance, a fast dance. It's the dance danced by the vibrating string, the dance danced by any Dirichlet F over all its sines and cosines. Yes, teaching is all dances. It doesn't miss a step. I stand up there and wobble like dark in the hall. I stand up there and totter like a chandelier in a storm. I'm the fancy dancer, the frantic dancer, the answer dancer, the cancer dancer, on dancer, on prancer, on pantser, on chancer. Yes, teaching is some dance. It goes on and on. And I stand up there and run, the curve, not of pursuit, but of flight. And you know the loneliness of the long-distance runner? Well, this is the short-distance runner. Yes, teaching is a sport, a competitive sport. I throw, I catch, I aim, I dive, but mostly I run. I run the way sine n naught x runs through the Fourier series, knocking out everything in its path, searching for itself, and then running on anyway. I run through the theorem, run through the proof, run through the lies, run through the truth. I run through the air with the greatest of ease, just like the rain smashes down through the trees. So I promised you Fourier series, I think. So you got them, whether you wanted them or not. And these are poems from regular life. And I have a lot of regular life. In particular, kids and cats. So this is in one poem, kids and cats. I'm very passionate about kids. You know, I like cats, you know. About babies and kids. I've had 5 babies. And they've enhanced my feeling of math, my sense of math, and my sense of poetry. Yeah. It's a transitive law, which had to do with the problem I was working on. Very quickly, A is related to B in some way, B is related to C in some way, would mean, if the relation is transitive, that A is related to C. So transits. It's a kind of transitive law when, in a house of growing children, two people who pet the same cat are petting each other, especially if one of them is holding the cat, especially if both of them are holding the cat. And if Devin gets under the blanket with Mirage and lets only their heads stick out and smiles up in that way, if the poke of Devin's nose is close to that spot between Mirage's ears, and I grab hold of it all and kiss it all, well, Devin also knows, and Mirage also knows, that something is necessary, something is sufficient, and something else is scared. And I know that's not transitive law. There's another name for that. But I said it's a kind of transitive law. A and C related to B. That means A is related to C. Okay, anyway, promised you, maybe not, but music. I promised you Handel, but you're getting Mozart. That's the idea, right? Pick Mozart, but it's really bad music and bad math. It's really bad math. Sometimes I don't want to accent the first beat. I want to accent all beats. I want to play every note as though it were the first. Every math thing should also be accented. Equations, expressions, single Greek letters, well-formed formulae, meaningless strings and equal signs, high-powered theorems, incorrect ideas with no applications. Every truth is beauty. Every untruth is beauty. I love all. I love each. Should write theorem before, QED after, a G clef before, a double bar after each. Another thing in my regular life is shopping, usually thrift shopping. I really enjoy dressing up and clothes. Some people here know. So at this time, black lace was in style. It's not in so much anymore. I'm just crazy about it now, but it gets mathy after a while, but it starts out, about black lace. Right now I'm thinking about black lace. Black lace skirts, black lace scarves, 2 knee-high cartons of black lace knee-highs, 3 pair for $1 at Joe Mars. Not black lace like a spider's web, not black lace like the top branches of a tree, superimposed upon the top branches of another tree. No, I mean flower lace, birdie lace, minuscule dots and circles lace. Not sexy lace, not girdles and garters, not long leg covered with black roses. I mean cute black lace, sweet black lace, feminist black lace. Anyway, black lace. As though it would be okay if everything were all inked in, and all big objects were the same flower, and all small objects were the same bud, and the parts in between were netted. If space alternated like that between dark and dim, as though that would be okay. And Carlos mentioned that I've written about 2 of my tragedy odysseys in my life. And one is that my first husband had multiple sclerosis. He lived with it for 26 years before he died, and I was his caregiver at first in the real way, and then when he was in a nursing home in that way. So I've written actually several books about it, and my last book is about that too, poetry and prose. But in this book are a few poems about it, and I'm going to read 2. Today we were alone in that room again, I and this man, who was once my world, later my burden, lately my enemy, and still somehow my husband. Alone in this hospital room, alone these soft evening hours. Each of us has something that is hurting and that we need to get rid of. For him, life. For me, the problem of characterizing comparability relations. He lay there, eyes open but unseeing, mouth yawning but untired, and possessing no symmetry about any line. I sat with him, healthy, but equally stopped, equally unable. Yes, there we were again, working side by side, beating and grading our separate wounds, wishing against wish that time could heal them. Every once in a while, his eyebrows twitched, and every once in a while, I wrote something down. but this also has to do with being a well spouse. And my first husband was a physicist, a very well-known physicist working in general relativity, and he coined the phrase dragging of inertial frames. It basically is what it feels, what it feels like, if that makes any sense. So dream of the dragging of inertial frames. I discovered that objects can't move without pulling what's next to them. So when a train starts up, so does part of the road. Everything is like gum. Everything is like muscles. These muscles work very hard. A train can't be moving and not the road. I can't be moving and not Jeff. I can't do range of motion on him while he does range of stillness on me. And the other bigger tragedy, no, it was more of a tragedy because it was more sudden, is in this poem. You have to catch it while you can. Let's just mention briefly. I think I've solved the problem, but I still lie in a ball. What I wait for is time. It has to pass the 2-day test, and it might not. Well, Karen didn't. Karen was merely born by me. She did not get to stay by me. So I lie here and curl. I lie here and wait. Not for a phone call, not for an ambulance call, only for my own mind to think too much. And about inner life, just in case I haven't been talking about inner life already, this is more inner. And I'm going to read this poem. I'll let you read others, but I think I will read only this poem in that category. Other poems have, other poems have come from this poem, and I probably will get to read one of them. And so it's been a recurring theme in my work. I feel so sorry for the insides of things. I imagine them sweating and cramping. I hear them trying to flex. I know from complex analysis that sometimes outsides determine the insides. And I think maybe the insides are tired of being determined. And most things are inside. Most things are encased. I am afraid most things are alive. I would like to go around rescuing all the insides. I would like to dig into everything and pull the insides outside. But there is not enough outside to go around. If I can't rescue them, maybe I can put them out of their misery. I know I can't shoot them, but I can try to squash them, or I can go around injecting poison into them. But what kind of poison works for this form of life? And now something about the opposite, about outer life. How can a mathematician relate to to regular people? Well, many ways. But this particular poem is called Math on the Bus. The only available seat is half a seat, because the woman on my right needs the other half. Actually, the man on my left also needs the other half. Still, using the calc text as a table, I managed to get settled working. And the woman on my right shouts out a monologue for all to hear. I finished with that calculus a long time ago. I'm not doing no more of that calculus. My daughter went to college and I had to help her with that calculus, and I'm not doing no more sines. I'm not doing no more cosines, no more of that calculus. No, sir, no way. A block before my stop, I put my papers away and look up. The woman smiles at me and asks, "Did you give up?" I smiled back. As a matter of fact, I did. And there's lots in here about childhood. And, what about before I took algebra? I was good at math then, too. Was I a mathematician? And I tend to think that, yes, I was. I was a potential, mathematician. This poem is called Math Research Age 4, because this is another way that math research feels like. One day I set out for the Queen Anne's lace. There was no end to what I set out on. After a while, the grass got sharp, and the white field became like outer space. Later still it rained, slobbering the sharp, wet grass against my legs. Destination faded into rumor, and so did home. I was stranded in the middle. But I was not lost. The way back was a straight line behind me. I was only stuck on the straight line before me. I knew the way back. It was the will I couldn't find. How are we doing time-wise? We're pretty good. Yeah, we are. Okay. Here are two poems that got away from crossing. I mean, they just somehow were not put in there, and I think should have been. So they'll be in some other book sometime. So they'll have titles, and one title will be Math Research. Simply that. One entire night I lay awake with my head stark still. Each hour went by, each half hour went by. My brain inside my head was also still. All it did was watch those points and lines. By then the lines were equivalence classes, so they bulged like a relief map, or maybe like varicose veins. Sometimes my brain was the inside and needed to be rescued. Other times my brain was the only outside. It looked past my skull at the inside it was interested in, then nearby island of sticks and stones. Sometimes it seemed that the island looked back. The two of us were fellow survivors of some shipwreck, bobbing along the way, among the waves, trying to reach each other. And those 8 hours, my brain stayed as unmoving as no brain. That whole time, nothing was accomplished. No new lines, no new equivalence classes. All that happened was continuing existence and the passing of that night. And this poem I would call Math. How else are we going to know that it's about math? As you'll see. I am not willing to let anything else remind me that I am one of many and that there are too many. I am not willing to listen to the music of the spheres. I am able to listen only to the humming of the lines, the throbbing of the planes, and those creatures I call hellkites. Nothing else can make me say it. Nothing else can make me do it. Nothing else can lead me slowly into that good night. And I feel like reading one poem from Epsilon Country, which is about, it's one of my caregiving books. The second in the series, and the third is coming out, and actually I'm going to read one poem from it later. It's called A Song of Destruction, which is kind of a sequel to a poem in the book called A Song of Despair, and there are three things about it. It's partly about wheelchair inaccessibility in the world. It was more so then than now. It's partly about something called pathological functions. Functions that are cool, okay, or in case if you can look at them. In my calc class, I tell my students about everywhere continuous, nowhere differentiable functions, and they have to be pathological. I also have to say that in the last line, as a euphemism for the wheelchair, the electric wheelchair was trike. You know, my then husband thought of it as he wanted to think of it as being like a motorcycle, so we used to call it a trike. Okay. A Song of Destruction. Not only is Earth not round, Earth is not flat. Earth is a polyhedron, an irregular polyhedron, with edges and corners at every quarter turn. Not even a convex polyhedron, but chock full of potholes, racked with ditches. There are many opportunities to fall. Earth is also ridden with steeples and spears. There are many opportunities to be impaled. Earth is all edges and corners. Earth has no faces. Earth is nowhere flat and nowhere round. Earth is continuous stair, continuous escalator. Earth is inaccessible by trike or by foot. I'm going to read, we do have time, right? I ceased to know we have time. I don't have any poems left to read. I'm going to read something, I think I'll just read one poem. Nope, I'll read two. From Chronic Progressive, the new book, which my son designed. He didn't design the cover, but he did the photo that's on the cover. That's throughout the whole front and back cover. It's called Another Misfortune Cookie, for reasons it's hard. I'll leave it at that. There are other poems called Misfortune Cookies, that I wrote. Okay. First, a well-spoused slogan is, when one is sick, two need help. And actually, there is a WellSpouse Foundation, wellspouse.org. Anyone here who has any caregiving situations or knows anybody and has not, hit that website, that I suggested. And another math paper that I was working on at the time did involve the obvious fact, made use of the obvious fact that every straight line in the plane, anyway, is the side of exactly two squares, one on each side. So that found its way into, it's actually a dream that I had. Help, I'm being held prisoner in a box. The box is open on one end, but I am tied to the other. Moreover, to this other end is attached a second box. Yes, every square is an edge of exactly two cubes. And now they are forcing me to stand up tall and walk. I must carry around two cages, not only the one I am in. And this poem is called Alone, because I was alone. When I leave the house in the morning, cats can't lock me out. Cats can't even follow me into the vestibule. Cats can only stay behind the glass YZ plane as I move further into the rain. When I come home and ring the bell, cats inside can't run to let me in. Cats can only bounce around the first octant. Buzz, shiver, sizzle, shriek as I fumble inside my purse so bleak. And if I fall asleep reading, cats can only lie down beside me, sleeping with me in too much glare in the lonely king-size unit square. And love. All right. This little book is published by my husband, actually. He put it together. Surviving the Alphabet. And I think I will read Impossible Dreams, just the one poem. It won't take me long to find it. Here it is. Impossible Dreams. Well, it's about how people say, even this shall come to pass. Maybe I need to say that, maybe I don't. I would like to be for him something that doesn't come to pass, something more than flowers or trees, something more in the line of a theorem. It's not my fault that even I shall come to pass. If I had a choice, I would not come to pass. If I had a choice, I would be a theorem. I would like him to look at me as though he believes I will not come to pass. And then I could look at him and say, you're right, I am the main theorem. I might split up into many cases, but I will always be true. And I would like to end with, say goodbye to some poems that I was planning to read, and read just two other poems. One is a relatively recent poem called Math on Another Bus. Because remember, I read Math on the Bus. Math on Another Bus. I was working on that associative arithmetics problem, testing out examples and counterexamples of the page filling up with cute little integers. A kid, skinny, green hair, came over. I have a calculator. He held it out to me. You're doing those calculations. You can borrow my calculator. Oh, I smiled. Thanks very much. But I'm not doing that kind of calculating. I wanted to take him up on his offer, but I wasn't doing what calculators do. And the next to the last poem in Crossing is part of the answer to why math. One of the several answers. You can draw pictures without analytic geometry. Straight lines don't need ax plus b. Circles don't need x squared plus y squared. Loops and scallops don't need polar coordinates. But they wouldn't be as pretty. They're prettier with axes running through them and equations running along them. Spirals aren't as pretty without theta. Four-leaf clovers aren't as pretty without sine square theta. Beauty isn't as pretty without truth. Thanks.